Hello, Elara. Did you miss me?
The sharp click-clack of red-bottomed stilettos echoing across the marble lobby of the Sterling Tower was a sound Ophelia knew too well. It was the sound of trouble approaching. Outside, the Chicago wind howled, whipping snow against the massive glass revolving doors. But inside, the air was still, scented with expensive pine and the metallic tang of money. Ophelia didn't look up. She kept her eyes focused on the brass railing she was polishing, her hand moving in a steady, rhythmic circle. At 42, she had mastered the art of being invisible. To the executives rushing past in their wool coats, she was just part of the architecture, no more alive than the potted ferns or the velvet ropes. But Ophelia saw everything. She saw the stress lines on the CEO's forehead, the secret glances between secretaries, and today, she saw the predator entering the room. Bianca swept through the lobby like a winter storm wrapped in white fox fur. On her finger, a diamond the size of a quail egg caught the light of the crystal chandeliers, announcing her status as the future Mrs. Julian Sterling before she even spoke a word. Flanked by two giggling friends who looked like clones in designer trenches, Bianca wasn't heading for the elevators. She was heading straight for the corner where Ophelia was working. Ophelia felt the shift in the air, a coldness that had nothing to do with the blizzard outside. She unconsciously touched the small, hidden silver locket beneath her gray uniform, a reflex she had developed over 10 years of hiding in plain sight. "Excuse me," a voice dripped with faux sweetness, cutting through the low hum of the lobby. Ophelia paused, slowly straightening her back. She turned to find Bianca standing uncomfortably close, a smirk playing on her perfectly painted red lips. "Oh, good you are here. I was worried you might have. I don't know," vanished into the mop closet. Her friends stifled a laugh, covering their mouths with manicured hands. Ophelia met Bianca's gaze with a calm, unsettling stillness. "How can I help you, Miss Bianca?" she asked, her voice low and steady, lacking the submissiveness Bianca clearly expected. Bianca's eyes narrowed slightly, annoyed by the lack of fear in the older woman's face. She reached into her oversized Hermes bag and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. It was heavy, embossed with gold leaf, the kind of stationery that cost more than Ophelia's weekly grocery budget. "Actually, I have something for you," Bianca said, her voice rising just enough to draw the attention of a few passing businessmen. "Julian and I were talking, and we thought it would be charitable to include everyone in our joy." She extended the envelope, but didn't release it immediately when Ophelia reached out, forcing a brief, awkward tug-of-war. "It's for the wedding tomorrow night." At the Drake, Bianca announced, her eyes gleaming with malice. "I know it's short notice, but surely you don't have a busy social calendar." She leaned in, her expensive perfume cloying and suffocating. "Now, listen carefully, Ophelia. It is strictly black tie. That means gowns, jewels, elegance." She raked her eyes over Ophelia's faded gray uniform and the scuffed rubber shoes. "Do try to find something that doesn't smell like bleach. We wouldn't want the guests to think the staff is mingling, would we?" The laughter from the three women was sharp and jagged. Ophelia took the envelope, feeling the weight of the insult pressed into the expensive paper. She didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She simply held the invitation with hands that were rough from labor, but steady with dignity. "Thank you for the invitation," Ophelia said softly, turning back to her work before they could see the fire igniting in her chest. Bianca let out a huff of disbelief, clearly disappointed by the lack of drama, and spun around on her heels. Ophelia clutches the heavy invitation as Bianca walks away laughing, the cruel joke hanging in the cold air like the winter frost. That invitation wasn't a gift. It was a weapon. But Bianca has no idea who she just messed with. If you are standing with Ophelia and want to see her turn this humiliation into a victory, please comment the number 8 below to let me know you're still watching. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the Black King channel and hit that bell. Your support allows us to keep bringing you powerful stories where real queens rise against the odds. Now, let's see how Ophelia responds. The invitation lay on the chipped formica kitchen table like a live grenade, threatening to blow up the quiet, invisible life Ophelia had built for herself. Her apartment in the South Side was a universe away from the gilded lobby of the Sterling Tower. Here, the air smelled of cinnamon tea and old paper, and the only sound was the radiator hissing and clanking in the corner, fighting a losing battle against the Chicago freeze. Ophelia sat in her worn armchair, her uniform finally discarded for a simple cotton robe, staring at the gold calligraphy that spelled out her humiliation. Her eyes drifted to the date on the card, December 24th. A cruel coincidence, or perhaps the universe having a twisted sense of humor. It was exactly 10 years ago to the day that she had sat in a sterile lawyer's office, pen hovering over the documents that would dissolve the Vance Charity Trust and strip her of her family legacy to save her late husband's reputation. She had walked out of that office with nothing but her name and a silent vow to disappear. And she had succeeded. For a decade, she had scrubbed floors and emptied trash cans, finding a strange, numbing comfort in the anonymity of manual labor. But today, Bianca had ripped that protective cover away. Ophelia stood up and paced the small room, the floorboards creaking under her bare feet. The shame of the encounter burned in her chest like a physical wound. She picked up the heavy invitation, her hand hovering over the plastic trash can. It would be so easy to throw it away. It would be safer to stay home, drink her tea, and let them laugh at the empty space where the cleaning lady should have been. But then she caught her reflection in the darkened window pane. She saw the gray streaks in her hair and the lines etched around her eyes, but beneath the fatigue, she saw something else, a spark that hadn't quite been extinguished. She remembered her father's deep rumbling voice from years ago, telling her, "A queen is a queen, with or without a crown, Ophelia. It's the spine that makes the royalty, not the diamonds." Bianca hadn't just mocked her clothes, she had mocked her existence. To hide now would be to agree with her. It would be admitting that Ophelia Vance was truly gone. She turned away from the trash can and walked over to the closet, pulling down a dusty wooden box from the top shelf. Inside, buried under old tax returns and faded receipts, was a leather-bound address book. Her fingers trembled as she turned the pages, stopping at a name she hadn't dared to whisper in years. She picked up the phone, the dial tone humming in her ear like a heartbeat. She punched in the numbers, terrified that the line would be dead, or worse, that she would be forgotten. "Hello." The voice on the other end was cultured, warm, but weary. Ophelia took a breath, her voice shaking before steadying into the steeliness that had once commanded boardrooms. "Hello, Rose? It's Ophelia. I need a favor." "No. I need a resurrection." On the other end, a sharp intake of breath, followed by a familiar, fierce voice. "I've been waiting 10 years for this call. I'll be there in 20 minutes. A sharp, authoritative knock on the peeling paint of the door signaled the end of Ophelia the janitor and the return of Ophelia the legend. Before Ophelia could even fully turn the lock, the door swung open, admitting a whirlwind of expensive perfume, cold winter air, and the unstoppable force of nature that was Madame Rose. At 65, Rose moved with the energy of a woman half her age, dragging 2 massive garment bags and a metallic makeup case into the cramped apartment as if she were backstage at Paris Fashion Week rather than in a drafty walk-up on the South Side. She didn't say hello. She simply looked Ophelia up and down with critical, loving eyes and declared, "We have work to do, darling." And by work, I mean war. The next few hours were a blur of activity that transformed the small living room into a chaotic beauty parlor. Rose didn't just apply makeup. She applied confidence. As she worked, she filled the silence with stories of the old days, the galas Ophelia used to chair, the jazz clubs where she would sing an impromptu set, the way she used to command a room just by walking into it. "You've spent 10 years hunching your shoulders, trying to be smaller," Rose scolded gently, pinning Ophelia's hair up into a sophisticated, architectural chignon that exposed the elegant curve of her neck. "Today, we remind them that you take up space." She didn't try to hide the fine lines around Ophelia's eyes. Instead, she highlighted them, turning signs of age into badges of wisdom and authority. When the hair and makeup were done, Rose turned to the long garment bag hanging from the top of the door frame. The zipper hissed loudly in the quiet room. "I kept this," Rose said, her voice dropping to a reverent whisper. "You designed it yourself, remember? For the winter solstice gala the year before, everything happened." She pulled the plastic away, revealing a gown of deep, midnight emerald velvet. It wasn't flashy like the sequins Bianca would undoubtedly wear. It was timeless. It was a dress meant for a woman who knew her worth didn't sparkle. It glowed. Ophelia stepped into the dress, the heavy velvet hugging her frame like an old friend, the silk lining cool against her skin. She walked over to the dusty full-length mirror propped against the wall. The transformation was so absolute it stole the breath from her lungs. The woman in the gray uniform was gone. Staring back was Ophelia Vance, regal, imposing, and breathtakingly beautiful. Rose stepped up behind her, fastening a vintage diamond necklace around her throat, a piece Ophelia thought had been sold years ago. "Your mother's," Rose said, meeting her eyes in the reflection. "I bought it back from the pawn shop the day you sold it. I knew you'd need your armor back someday." Ophelia touched the cold stones, tears pricking her eyes, not of sadness, but of strength. She wasn't just dressing up for a party. She was reclaiming her history. Rose handed her a vintage beaded clutch and opened the apartment door, where the snowy street awaited below. A mischievous grin spread across the older woman's face. "Well, my dear," Rose asked, gesturing to the world outside, "are you ready to crash a wedding?" Ophelia smirked, a spark of dangerous wit returning to her eyes as she adjusted her silk wrap. "I'm not crashing it, Rose. I was invited. Ophelia has found her armor, and the Queen has officially returned. If you are loving this stunning transformation and standing with her, please comment the number 1 below to let me know you are still watching. And if you haven't joined us yet, I recommend you subscribe to the Black King channel and turn on the bell. We tell stories of dignity and triumph, and you won't want to miss the showdown that is about to happen. Your support helps us continue creating great content to inspire you. Now, let's go to the wedding. The Gold Coast room at the Drake Hotel was a sea of black tuxedos and designer sequins, buzzing with the kind of laughter that cost money, until the heavy double doors swung open. Inside, the massive ballroom was a spectacle of holiday excess. A 20-foot Christmas tree brushed the ceiling, dripping with crystal ornaments that scattered light like diamonds, while outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Chicago snow swirled in a violent, silent ballet. Yet, the warmth in the room felt artificial, generated more by the heat of gossip than the spirit of the season. At the center of it all stood Bianca, holding a flute of vintage champagne, her white fur draped carelessly over one shoulder as she held court near a melting ice sculpture of a swan. She was in the middle of retelling her favorite anecdote of the evening, her voice carrying over the soft jazz quartet. "I mean, can you imagine?" Bianca giggled, leaning into her friends. "I gave her the invite just to see the look on her face. I bet she's at home right now, crying into her mop bucket, wondering if she could fashion a dress out of trash bags." The group erupted in polite, sycophantic laughter, clinking their glasses. Julian, standing a few feet away, swirled his whiskey, looking bored and visibly exhausted by the superficial display, his eyes wandering to the exit as if planning an escape route. Then the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't a sound, but a sudden lack of it. The heavy mahogany doors at the far end of the ballroom groaned open, admitting a draft of cool air that cut through the humidity of the party. The jazz drummer missed a beat, and then the band trailed off into confused silence. Conversations died mid-sentence. Heads turned, one by one, like dominoes falling, until every pair of eyes in the room was fixed on the entrance. Ophelia stood in the archway. She didn't pause for effect. She didn't need to. She simply existed, and that was enough to command the room. The midnight emerald velvet gown flowed around her like liquid night, absorbing the light rather than reflecting it, a stark, majestic contrast to the flashy glitter of the other guests. She moved with a slow, deliberate grace, her chin lifted, her silver hair gleaming under the chandeliers like a halo of steel. As she glided across the polished floor, the crowd instinctively parted, creating a wide path for her. She wasn't just wearing a dress. She was wearing history, carrying herself with an old-world elegance that made everyone else in the room look like they were playing dress-up. Bianca's smile froze, then slowly curdled into a look of confusion. She squinted, tilting her head as her brain tried to reconcile this regal, imposing figure with the invisible woman she had mocked only yesterday. Ophelia stopped in the dead center of the room, turning slowly to face the head table, catching the light on the vintage diamond necklace at her throat. The silence was so absolute you could hear the wind howling against the glass. A hushed whisper sweeps through the crowd as one of Bianca's own friends gasps, "Wait, is that the janitor?" Bianca marched toward Ophelia like a soldier defending crumbling territory, her face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and rising rage. The murmurs of the crowd acted like gasoline on her temper. She could feel their eyes sliding off her and clinging to the woman she had intended to be the punchline of her joke. Bianca stopped mere inches from Ophelia, her chest heaving beneath her white fur, the smell of her expensive champagne souring in the tense air. Nearby, an older gentleman, Mr. Henderson, one of the original partners of the Sterling firm, adjusted his glasses, his eyes widening as they locked onto the vintage necklace resting against Ophelia's collarbone, a piece of history he hadn't seen in decades. "I don't know who let you in," Bianca hissed, her voice loud enough to slice through the silence, desperate to regain control of the room. "I didn't think you'd actually have the nerve to show up. And where did you steal that dress, Ophelia? Did you raid the lost and found?" She let out a cruel, incredulous laugh, expecting the crowd to join in, but the ballroom remained dead silent. The guests were too captivated by Ophelia's stillness to entertain Bianca's hysterics. Ophelia looked down at Bianca, her expression unreadable, her posture relaxed yet immovable as a mountain. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Dignity cannot be stolen, child," Ophelia replied, her voice projecting clearly to the back of the room, smooth and rich like dark chocolate. "Unlike your manners." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Someone in the back actually whispered, "Damn." Bianca's mouth opened and closed like a fish, her face turning a violent shade of crimson. She raised a shaking finger, ready to scream for security, to demand this impostor be thrown out into the snow. But before Bianca could utter a sound, Mr. Henderson stepped forward from the crowd, his hands trembling. He walked past the stunned Julian and approached Ophelia as if he were approaching royalty. "Ophelia," he choked out, his voice cracking with emotion. "Ophelia Vance? The jazz singer? The philanthropist?" Bianca scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Don't be ridiculous, Arthur. She's the cleaning lady at the tower. She scrubs the toilets." Mr. Henderson ignored Bianca completely, turning his gaze to Julian, who looked utterly bewildered. "Julian," Mr. Henderson said, his voice gaining strength. "This isn't a cleaning lady. This is the woman who secretly funded your father's company when we were bankrupt 10 years ago. When the banks turned us away, she wrote a check that saved every job in that building. She isn't a cleaner. She's the silent partner who saved us all." The room erupted into chaos. Ophelia didn't deny it. She simply offered Mr. Henderson a small, sad smile. Julian stepped forward, eyes wide with shock and realization, looking from his arrogant wife to the woman who saved his family legacy. You are the silent angel my father wrote about?" The air in the ballroom shifted instantly. The mockery evaporated, replaced by a heavy, shame-filled silence that suffocated Bianca's arrogance. The guests, who moments ago had been ready to laugh at a cleaning lady, now looked at the floor, sipping their drinks nervously, unable to meet the gaze of the woman standing in the center of the room. Bianca had shrunk back against the ice sculpture, her face pale, the white fur coat that once looked so glamorous now seeming like a costume she was too childish to wear. She looked around for support, but even her friends had taken a subtle step away, distancing themselves from the humiliation radiating off her. Julian recovered first, though his voice was thick with regret. He stepped closer to Ophelia, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. "Ophelia." "Mrs. Vance," he stammered, the title feeling foreign but necessary on his tongue. "I had no idea. My father, he spoke of an angel investor, but I never knew it was you. I am so incredibly sorry." He glared at Bianca, a look of disappointment that cut deeper than any shout. "Please stay. Let us make this right. Let me get you a seat, a drink. Let's talk about reinstatement." Ophelia looked at him, then past him to the towering Christmas tree twinkling in the corner. For 10 years, she had looked at holiday decorations with a sense of loss, mourning the life she had sacrificed. But tonight, looking at the lights reflecting in the eyes of the people who finally saw her, she felt lighter. The debt was paid. The ghost was gone. She turned back to Julian, her expression soft but firm. "No, Julian," she said gently. "I didn't come here for a job. And I certainly didn't come for a drink. She took a step closer, lowering her voice so only he and Bianca could hear. I came to remind you that the foundation of this company wasn't built on money. It was built on people. She glanced at Bianca, who was staring at her shoes. Take care of your legacy, Julian. And teach your wife that people are not toys to be played with. Because you never know when the toy might own the building. With that, Ophelia turned on her heel. The velvet of her gown swirled around her ankles like a closing curtain. She began to walk toward the exit, and without a word being spoken, the crowd parted like the Red Sea. There were no whispers now, only looks of profound respect. At the door, Madame Rose was waiting, holding a thick, warm fur coat. Ophelia accepted it, wrapping herself in the warmth. Before she stepped out into the swirling snow, she reached into her purse and pulled out her plastic employee badge, the one that had defined her existence for a decade. She handed it to the stunned doorman. I won't be needing this tomorrow, she said with a wink. Merry Christmas. She stepped into the waiting vintage car, the cold wind feeling fresh and clean against her face. As Madame Rose's vintage car drives away, Ophelia smiles, watching the city lights blur. She isn't just a survivor anymore. She is the author of her own story again. True royalty isn't defined by a title, a crown, or the price tag on a dress. It is the quiet strength of character that remains unshaken even when the world tries to make us feel small. Ophelia's journey reminds us that when we walk with dignity and grace, we don't need to demand respect. It naturally clears a path for us, proving that kindness is the only currency that never loses its value. If this story warmed your heart today, we invite you to share this light with a friend and join our Black King family by subscribing below, so we can continue to discover the hidden queens and kings walking among us together.